Welcome, class. This is class number 5, our final class in the series on Hermetic progressions in action. Now, I want to let all of you know that this summer there will be a course that goes on for the 12 weeks that I will not be teaching. And Yvette Fortin will be teaching a class on esoteric psychology. This is the 5th book in the Brotherhood of Light series. This is going to be on Wednesday evenings, starting earlier than this class. This is 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. So add 2 hours for Eastern Time, 3 hours for Atlantic Time, subtract 1 for Pacific, add an hour for Central Time. Figure it out. Those of you in the UK, you're on your own. I think it's a 7-hour difference. So it'll be the wee hours of your day. Tonight's class is on the alchemy of progressions, and this is perhaps for me the most interesting work that we do in our tradition. So we'll get started shortly. I also wanted to say thank you to the one person out there in my audience who put in his originally 2 cents worth. It grew to 7 cents worth of suggestions for classes for the future. No one else offered any ideas as to what they would like to learn, which means I gotta teach whatever I want. Imagine that. But actually, I did get from one person what has now become a seminal vision for a future class on applied alchemy, which will also integrate the arts. Much harder to do remotely than it is within a classroom, but the ideas are definitely germinating. So I thank you for that, Bill. First quote of the night. There some ill planet reigns. I must be patient till the heavens look with an aspect more favorable. This is from Shakespeare's Winter's Tale, Act 2, Scene 1, spoken by Hermione. This is what tonight's class is about. In Hermetic astrology, the natal chart is considered to represent the most powerful influences which impact our character, consciousness, and life experiences. From the time of birth forward, the planets continue to move through the chart by what is called progressed motion. These progressed aspects of the planets create temporary astral weather conditions which impinge upon our unconscious mind or soul and stimulate us to think, feel, and behave in specific ways. Our thoughts, feelings, and actions can in turn attract specific trends of events and experiences. This is the sequence of events that becomes our lives. By calculating progressions, we can look forward and determine the timing of events in our lives. Progressions inform us whether or not we might experience sunshine or storms with our health, windfalls or losses economically, make or break off relationships, gain or lose employment, as well as numerous other types of activities. All right, that's the preface for tonight's class. And from the application side of this class, I wanted to discuss first personal information. I've actually had a lifetime of living my own life, so I know it unlike anyone else's life in this room. And I've also spent more than half of this lifetime studying astrological influences. And in fact, I think about 3/4 of my life. I started studying astrology in 1968. So this is a huge portion of my life where I've become aware of astrological influences. And I'm going to talk anecdotally about some events in my own life and what was going on at that time. Here in 1979, I had only completed the Brotherhood of Light lessons 2 years prior, and had been working with progressions for only 2 years, but was avidly engaged with them. And really, it became so apparent to me how major progressions mapped events in one's life. In this particular year, and I want to also arrange my notes here so that I can find the information that I'm looking for. In this particular year, I had been experiencing for some time, because it is a slow-moving aspect, Saturn squaring progressed Pluto. You can see up here that major progressed Saturn had strayed a little over 2 degrees from its position in my birth chart. Natal Pluto at 28 degrees of Leo and progressed Pluto at 28 degrees of Leo had not moved much from the time of birth, other than it being retrograde and having moved back from, I believe, 28 degrees Leo, 36 minutes, to 28 degrees, 22 minutes. So at approximately age 23, Pluto had moved a total of
4 minutes?
about, yeah, it looks like 4 minutes. Again, I will have new glasses the next time you see me.
All right.
Yes, that is really good news. No, 24 minutes, or 14, about 14 minutes.
Oh, it's 36.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong chart. In the natal chart, it is 36. So
Yeah, so
22 from 36 is 14. It was 14-minute difference. That's not huge, let me tell you. By any means, that's not huge. But that difference of minutes with Pluto is really not what this story's about. So, sorry for taking so much time with that. What I was concerned about is that Pluto, any aspects to Pluto will stimulate what area of my chart?
Work.
Work. What else will it stimulate in my chart?
Eighth house, insurance, taxes, debt.
All right.
Now, any aspect to Saturn by natal or progression would stimulate what? Death, taxes, indebtedness.
Loss, but it would be a loss of some sort.
Saturn generally brings losses, and a little further on in tonight's program, I'll give you some keywords on this.
But isn't Saturn
But-
safety, and then the other side is accidents?
Mars is accidents, and Saturn is safety-mindedness. They are somewhat incompatible with one another. But you can also see any progression to Saturn would also impact, for me, career and friendships. In my chart, Capricorn falls on the cusp of both the 10th and the 11th house. The other thing that I had been observing, and in my own life, although Course 10.2, Progressing the Horoscope, says that the major progressed moon has only 1/7 the power of the natal chart. In my own life, events triggered by the major progressed moon are far more significant than that.
Because you have a dominant moon?
Because the moon is dominant in my chart. And the moon not only rules the 7th house of partnerships, but with Cancer on the 4th house cusp, it is the only thing that stimulates matters related to home and family. My concerns that came up when I saw not only the Pluto-Saturn square, but the major progressed moon entering into a conjunction with Pluto, started to set up alarms for me in my life. To the point where there was some degree of anxiety tied in with that and what it might bring. Primarily, I was concerned about my father. Well, during the summer of 1979, my father totaled 4 cars.
He wasn't even that old, was he?
No. You might expect that now.
All
Hope
at
you're not
once.
watching, Daddy.
Was it all at once or different times?
Oh, no, he did them on separate occasions. Yeah, these were his own vehicles.
Oh, okay.
And on separate occasions. So what was happening during this summer is my anxiety levels increased with each and every accident. Imagine that. And I could see that this particular aspect was becoming perfect at the beginning of September. That it was going to be exact at that time. So where my mind went, and I love the power of what I call negative thinking. The power of negative thinking is very important when you do progressions, because it is, of course, one of the options as to how things might turn out. So the value and the power of negative thinking also, you'll hear it called later, worst case scenario. You look at that as one of the potentials. Where do you think my worst case scenario went?
Your father.
Yeah, my concern became that my father could actually die. And that concerned me because, of course, my closeness to my family and this being a key relationship. The day that this lunar aspect became perfect, sitting right on top of both the natal and progressed Pluto, my paternal grandfather died, my father's father. So why do you think I'm telling you this story?
To learn from it.
Yeah, thank you, Vicki. The consummate teacher, she recognized the teachable moment. Yeah, I want you to learn from this. And what I want you to learn is what you expect is not always what happens.
Right.
But guess what? It does happen within the parameter of the signs, planets, houses, and aspects. You may just be looking in one direction with that and become fixated on one possible outcome, and you get a different outcome. Was my father affected under this aspect?
Sure.
Yes. He lost his father. We were all affected by this. But my imagination did not expand outside of what I was concerned about and what was evidentiary up to that point. Who was having the accidents? It was my daddy. So that is the lesson in all of this, that you can watch your aspects, and I do hope after this class that you do. I can't tell you anything that could be more valuable to you in your life is to start watching your aspects and looking at them in advance of things, but also going back and looking to your past, because it will inform you. Oops, that moves quickly. Vicki, I'm going to ask you to move in a bit, because I think you're blocking the reception to the computer. There. Okay. So, here's an example of what one can do. And again, this is personal, but as I said, there isn't a life I know better than mine. I have just taken out a piece of my lifetime chronology that I have been creating, which shows the year and the month, and if I know the exact date that something has happened, I include that. There's nothing more illuminating when you are able to narrow your vision down to a date. And then what I do is I write in key events that happen. This is just a small cross-section from an eventful period in my life. You can see the events that I was talking about here. And then over here, what I have done is I have gone in, and I don't have all of the aspects in here. You can see certain areas are empty. But what have we learned over the last 4 weeks? We've learned that what happens under progressed aspects to the sun. We've learned how to look at the 4 stellar areals of any aspect and what areas of your life are being stimulated. So what you can do is, in reverse process, you'll have a pretty good idea of where to look at your chart when you look at your list of progressions. If you have the horoscope program, go in and print out a list of aspects from birth into the future. It might end up looking something like this, which is several sheets of paper, but it's really useful information for you, because you can then go back. What are you looking for when you've had honors in your life? Progressions to the sun or midheaven, or to the ruler of the 10th house. If it's tied in with a move, you're going to be looking to progressions that involve the moon, or to the rulers of the 4th house, so on and so forth. You go back and you start picking out the aspects that were active at that time, and you correspond them to what was going on in your life at that time. Why would you do this? Hopefully to learn. But the thing is, know your history, know your destiny. That's what it boils down to. If you can actually see a traceable pattern of how your progressions have affected you in the past, you have a fairly good idea of how they're going to manifest in the future, what the outcome is going to be.
I'm not quite following how you would draw the two together. That how just because it happened in the past doesn't necessarily mean that same patterns will repeat.
The nature of the aspect won't, but the planets are the same. Aspects to Venus, if in your life they create highly social periods, while in somebody else's life they create more events that are related to the arts, then you know which to expect. If in your life Saturn aspects bring in a period of prolonged responsibilities, as opposed to prolonged losses, then you know in the future what there is going to be a greater likelihood for it to manifest in this way. But again, as I showed you from my own experience, you can't always predict with precision, though I have had clients come back repeatedly, and of course feedback from clients is wonderfully essential. And one of the first feedbacks I remembered was from around this time period, 1978 or even earlier, when a client came to me and I saw certain aspects and warned her that there could be a divorce or separation 2 years down the line, and 3 years later I hear back from her and she says, when I came to see you, there wasn't a blip on the radar. that there was going to be a problem there. And this is what happened. Sometimes our perspective on other people's lives is easier than looking at our own. When your face is pressed up to the mirror, it's hard to see your face. But when you're working with complete strangers and you don't have any preconceived notion or subjectivity about their lives, as we all have about ours, you're able to approach it more objectively and see potential patterns of activity. So, using that previous experience of looking at aspects in advance, working myself up into a froth with anxiety about what could happen, I decided there had to be a better approach to astrology than the one I was at that time currently using. So, as I started to look at pages of aspects in advance, I decided during the mid-1980s that I'd actually try to apply it by not only seeing what energies would be present at a particular time in my life, but also decide if I could not direct them to express down courses that I might find more desirable. So, as you can see, the 80s were a fabulous decade. I'm not showing you all of the aspects I had because it would take up a lot. But I pulled out a few choice ones that were going on in my life at that time. And here you can see in 1985, Mars entered into a conjunction with Saturn that was to last until 1988. Boy, was I looking forward to that.
You survived.
Look at me. I'm here. And it is surprising. I doubt any of you can remember what was up before, but in my chart, my Mars is actually harmonious. Lucky me. One of the few harmonious items in my chart, of which I'm obviously proud. My Saturn, on the other hand, is not. My Saturn is drastically discordant, and therefore I suffer with it in many ways. And it falls in the 8th house, which you'll remember from the previous picture, which has to do with death, dying, losses, taxes, indebtedness, matters of credit, etc. The spirit world. That aspect concerned me. Seeing this coming up. Now, one of the reasons it concerned me is that I have the sign of Aries on the ascendant. And no planets in the 1st house. So any aspects to Mars would also impact what?
First house. Your physical well-being.
My physical well-being, my health, my personal interest, my life in general. So this aspect, I mean, I got good and worked up when I thought my father would die. So I saw this aspect and I thought, okay, I want to be alert and concerned, but, you know, if you're going to die, what's a good thing? Let's see if you can't be, live. See if you can't be prepared, but also go about living your life. And I decided under this aspect, I was going to apply the process of alchemizing major progressions. Now, to add to the fun that was going on during that decade, same year, my midheaven moved to square Mars, which went on till 87. My Mercury progressed forward. In both the midheaven and Mercury were moving through my 11th house of friendships. And what happened? My progressed ascendant, while this was an orb, my progressed ascendant moved up to oppose Saturn in my chart, which was then natal Saturn, followed by the ascendant opposing progressed Mars and the ascendant opposing progressed Saturn.
Didn't look good, did it?
These were the wonder years.
I'm gonna die with no friends.
Right, I'm going to die with no friends. No one came to the funeral. Well, I did lose a lot of friends. During that period of time, I lost about 30 friends a year to AIDS. So my entire peer group disappeared in the 80s, with the first friend being diagnosed in 1980 and starting to bury people about the following year on. So this is what was happening in the world around me. I mean, it was truly a world event. It was a pandemic that was going on. And so the awareness of death was everywhere during that period of time. So those were the aspects. And I decided that, okay, let's see what we can do with this one. What happens when you have Mars progressions? Your aggressive urges are being stimulated, which can be through passion or through strife. It can be antagonism, accidents, injuries, fevers. I was concerned about all those things. I was seeing them around me continuously. Safety urges, progressions involving Saturn attract a lack of resources, restrictions, losses, confinement, sorrows, responsibilities. That might be the theme song of my life. Who knows? Yeah, I mean, that just sounds like a typical year to me. But I didn't want it to become amplified. No, I don't want to sound bleak. I actually have a pretty good sense of life. Yeah.
You have a great life.
But that is the material that I work with all the time. So these are the things that were concerning me. And then I was looking at the house position that was being most strongly stimulated by this, which had to do with death, the end of things, the spirit world, metaphysics, inheritances, legacies, other people's resources, partners' money, credit cards, and debts. Let's see. Which of these would I rather have? You know, this is like a menu. This is the restaurant you don't want to go to and order from. This is the bad menu. So I had to decide, since these are the areas that are being stimulated, which of these qualities would I find more palatable? And certainly courage, passion, and effort appeal to me more than strife, antagonism, accidents, injuries, and fevers. And if I were to pick from this menu, you know, we've gone from what? Salads and appetizers to, you know, main course. Let's see. I think I'll just take responsibilities. I'm not that hungry. And then from this menu, the dessert plate, I decided that I could probably best focus in on the end of things. Credit and debts would be what I would take on at that time in my life. At that period in my life, I neither had credit or debt.
That's a good.
Yeah, neither a borrower nor a lender be. Another Shakespeare. All right, another quote, which I absolutely love. By E.M. Forster, failure or success seems to have been allotted to men by their stars, but they retain the power of wriggling, of fighting with their star or against it. And in the whole universe, the only really interesting movement is this wriggle. I agree.
Beautiful.
It's the only interesting part of astrology. Well, there's a lot of interesting parts, but I'll say the most interesting part, not the only interesting part. The most interesting part is the riddle. That's why we do this, because the riddle actually interests us. So what did I do? I decided I would take action steps. Now there's 3 things that we have to do when we want to change a habit system. And that has to do with altering our thought, feeling, and behavior. And sometimes behavior's the one you can start altering first because you can actually take action steps. And then you can work on your thoughts and feelings as you start to see successes in the area. So I decided at that point, it may have been somewhat fatalistic, that based on my perceptions of my possible death of my father from a couple years before, it can or can't happen. It's going to manifest somehow. It just may not be as I expected. Certainly manifested in the loss of peer group during that period of time. And so I decided, well, off the menu, the items I chose off the menu were to 1, establish credit. Well, how do you do that?
Get into debt.
You get in debt. So I got my first credit card, and I bought myself a Gucci watch. Yes. And I decided that my pain with that over time would establish credit, plus whenever I wore it, I would use it as a talisman of something to feel good about. I'd let myself feel prosperous, and it became a symbol in this process for me of focusing in on what was the constructive behavior that I was working on in order to alter the direction of energy. The thing you need to know about aspects, you've got these stellar aerials, you have energy going on in your chart, and it is seeking to express itself. And it can either burst through the dam, or you can start building spillways and causeways ahead of time and start directing that flow of energy in a direction where you would like it to express. That's what I did. I opened at that time my first retirement account. With Saturn in the 8th house, I had no money put aside for my retirement. Well, after 2007, I still no longer have any money put aside for my retirement. The market took care of that. I actually prepared a testament in case I decided, well, in case anything happened to me, I'll actually be, prepared for this so that there isn't a, mess of some kind left behind. And then I also at that time decided to purchase life insurance so that if something did happen to me, someone would benefit from it. So that was my plan. I decided that picking from the menu, I could select areas where I could alter my behavior and get energy moving down specific lines of action. Why? The energy needed to express.
Did you also look at other aspects to see whether there were other aspects that supported these things even more so, or did you feel that
This
just
conjunctions are strong enough.
Are they?
Yeah, if you're looking at progressions in your chart, conjunctions are the things that bring events to pass. Conjunctions and oppositions.
So you knew that you'd have a reasonable amount of success with effort.
I've always had success with effort in my life.
Mm.
It's an amazing thing.
It's
When
the
you-
effort that is important, isn't it?
As I get older, yes. When I was young back then, and you know what? I had loads of energy.
Yeah.
I
The
was
reason-
continually motivated and excited about life and doing things.
The reason I'm saying that is because if you didn't see very much progress, how did you keep yourself motivated? How did you keep yourself...
Gucci watch.
Oh, the Gucci watch.
It's the talisman. Right. No, the advantage of having a talisman on you
Yeah.
is it becomes a symbol. and you just keep focusing back. The other thing that you work with also, in conjunction with your aspects, and we'll talk about it later, it's basically positive thought statements. And it's a matter of, it's somewhat retraining your consciousness to also think in areas. Feeling follows thought, is what happens. If I put out a keyword from any of these things, you could then have a feeling that goes with it. Rarely do we have feelings without there being a thought that has initially generated that. So the approach to alchemy in conjunction with astrology sort of brings in two different forms of psychology is what I've determined. I had a conversation with a younger member of our organization a week or so ago who, going through a social work program, is very gung-ho on CBT, on cognitive behavioral therapy, as being the thing to make change happen. However, I feel that the astrological alchemy union actually combines two types of psychology, which would be more of the depth therapy or the archetypes of the Jungian system, where you actually go in and you identify the cause from a set of symbols, a set of archetypal symbols. And then the application of alchemy is more cognitive behavioral therapy. You become aware of the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you act, and you start altering that in a methodology that moves towards a different outcome. But it actually combines the two systems. Without the archetypal system, you don't have the meaty material to know what it is you're actually working with. And the cognitive behavioral therapy is what allows you to actually bring about different results than what have happened all along. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. So I wanted to show you something, an application of this process, of how you look, you see what's coming up, and this is what I did. And I felt really good about doing that. And I focused in on that. And I worked to think very constructively. And Vega's earlier advice was, you live. So, you know what? It was the 80s, and I was still alive, and I was still living. Oh, here's a great quote from Isabel Hickey, one of the mothers of horary astrology. All anyone can see in a birth chart are tendencies that will become facts if he does not do something to alter them. Well, let me go back, because I don't think I included what actually happened in here. This is what I set up to do. Let me tell you what happened over these years. Not only did I lose just about every friend in my peer group at that time, to death. I wasn't pissing people off. I still had friends. They were just dying on me. It was a very sad time that way. But I had a lot of great adventures. I did all of those really hideously boring activities, but which are so essential to a well-grounded, responsible life, which I previously didn't have. These are the adult things that we do. And Saturn I think of as being the planet of maturation. So it was really good for me to go through that particular exercise. Traveling. During those years, I did a lot of traveling in Mexico. And I can remember one of the flights taking off from Mexico City, heading towards Mérida in the Yucatan. And the next thing I know, an hour later, we're landing back in Mexico City again. We're all being shuttled off the plane, and no one's being told what happened. You know, but the good news is we landed. And then perhaps a few months later, I was flying from Mexico City to Oaxaca City, and we're getting ready to land, and it's pitch dark. I hear the plane hit something and feel it hit something. I don't know if this is a cow on the tarmac or somebody's roof or what. All I know is the plane takes off again, circles around another 20 minutes, and then lands. Nobody's informed as to, you know, who died or what happened. But it became apparent to me that these were two very, you know, potentially difficult times. Something could have happened. The highlight of this experience came about June 1986, when as I mentioned, for me, the major progressed moon triggers events in my life. To the date, when the moon entered conjunction with Mars and Saturn, I had a homeless man suffering from, who was a paranoid schizophrenic, climb through my window and tried to strangle me. Timing to the date. So, what I'm saying is, in all of this, there was the potential for a loss of life. I won't go into the details of that story, but they are both awful and magnificent. But I was able to get away, obviously. Here I am again today. But it was one of those things where it was so clear at that moment that, oh, you know, this is the event. This is the show. This is what all of this energy had been building up for here.
Do you think the fact that you had been channeling the energy into constructive areas where you felt like you had power and control over them could have factored into the fact that you...
Absolutely. I credit that completely. Also to the fact that during that period of my life, I was so focused in on my personal growth, my being constructive mentally, that this experience, one of the things about crazy people, I know that's not a proper diagnosis, but they can be incredibly lucid, and they can have incredible psychic ability. And in this event that happened, we were telepathic with one another. I would think something, and this person would vocalize it. So I realized that once that was going on, that I had to carefully control my thoughts to prevent anything harmful from happening and to make for a successful escape, which is what happened. So yes, that period of my life, as I've said in previous classes, we actually make our greatest growth in life under adverse aspects. So don't be fearful of your charts or your upcoming aspects unless you're really lazy. Because if you actually get into effort, you can make it into the most productive time in your life and really grow from it. And a conjunction of Mars to Saturn in the 8th house is probably, the sort of thing you don't wish on your enemies. But it became one of the most prominently constructive times in my life. Also one of those times that was filled with tragic events. But it certainly, I look back on that as being the building blocks of experience. This is from Zane. Astrology does not foreshadow events which are inevitable. It maps thoughts and activities which influence the thoughts and behavior and exert extra physical power on the environment in such a way as to make certain events probable. We've talked about this, the law of attraction. At that point in my life, I made sure that my brain was working for my benefit. The progressions come along and they stimulate periods in your life where you are thinking and feeling in very specific ways. And those thoughts and feelings function to attract the events and the experiences that come into our lives. In a sense, they mirror our consciousness. So these are times where one can either stimulate increase financially, you can promote your health, emphasize companionship or partnership, or we might have the opposite experiences going on, where we're having loss taking place or hardship financially, where we might be suffering from accident, injury, or illness, or going through periods of, solitude or aloneness. So, what we're looking for when we identify the alchemy, this is the most important work you can be doing at this point, is you want to know the relative conditioning energy of a planet in the natal chart. Well, guess what? Saturn was my most discordant planet. What could I expect from that particular menu? If left to its own devices, it was going to bring a lot of loss and hardship, which it did. But what we're looking at, and this goes back to the basics again, but why I keep reinforcing the use of astrodynes in this process, is nothing gives you better clues. Nothing does more to take the guesswork out of the process than being able to identify harmonies and discords. This is not my chart. So, this Venus adds harmony, Jupiter adds harmony, Mars and Saturn add discord, and then the nature of the progressed aspect contributes in part to the type of event attracted. Only in part. As I said earlier, conjunctions by progression, you're having big events in your life. Oppositions by progression, you're having big events going on in your life.
But that only applies to major progressions, right?
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that. With minors and transits, we only look really at conjunctions and oppositions, because those are the only aspects that pack enough wallop for those lesser aspects to be felt. Going back to my own aspect, as I mentioned, Saturn was my worst planet. Mars in my chart was just mildly harmonious. It had maybe 1 point something in harmony power. But that worked for me, because what did I do? I focused in a lot on the Mars energy, which was effort, initiating activities in my life that previously didn't exist. And that's what lent the constructive tone and truly the fact that why I feel I'm here today. I survived my life thus far. So, when we're doing this process, the astrologer has to offer more than one alternative for an aspect. it can mean more than one thing. The other thing is, it's not fair enough that you tell someone that really crappy events are coming into their life. That's just not fair.
There's a question, at what power is the square?
The square is moderately powerful. It is a discordant aspect, but it is a moderately powerful aspect.
But you feel squares.
Yes,
I do, or at least I feel mine.
as you should. You will feel them in your natal chart, and you will certainly feel them by progression. Trines are moderately powerful aspects, as are sextiles. But there are other aspects, inconjunct semi-squares, sesqui-squares, semi-sextiles, that are mild aspects. All right. Well, you know what? Sometimes you don't tell clients things. What if I had been an astrologer and my chart earlier, where I was thinking my father was going to die? Would I have benefited a client if I said that to them? Probably not. The object of the astrologer should be not merely to demonstrate to his client and to the world at large how accurate in every detail his predictions are, but to be of as great assistance as possible to his client and to society as a whole. That's our goal with all of this. It's not to wow people, it's to help people. It's to help other people survive their lives.
Well, in the case that you just brought up, though, could you have mentioned the aspect as expressing in other ways? You would want to tell them about the energy that's there, wouldn't you?
Right, and those of you that know me or might come to me in the future would pay attention, because I might say something like, this is a period of time where you might want to spend more time with your father. It's a period where there could be more events going on in his life where you could be drawn into attending to, some crises in that area. To tell someone, oh, your daddy's going to die on September 4th, what could happen? Going back to the picture of the brain, aspects are just one part of the whole process. And those of you who are studying the Brotherhood of Light lessons, Course 18, Imponderable Forces, a fascinating study, actually gives a breakdown in there saying that if you're studying occultism, metaphysics, you should actually, in terms of dividing the pie with your time, you should give 1/2 of your effort to your own thoughts. Your time is best spent observing and working with your thinking. 1/4 of the energy that you put into metaphysical or occult study should go to astrology and understanding the astrological influences and how they work. That remaining 1/4 of the pie is divided up between the spirit world, the character vibrations of objects, the environment, the thoughts of other people, etc. So, the power of our mind to attract events is as strong, if not stronger, as the power of the astrological chart to also attract events. Nowhere in my realm of imagination would I have come up with the idea that a paranoid schizophrenic was going to climb through my window and try to abduct me. Had I had that realm of imagination, when this person came to my window, I wouldn't have offered them, tea and oranges and sent them on their way. Only to turn around and see them coming through the window. That wasn't my imagination. That's not where my thoughts were going. That isn't something I dreamt up on my own. All right. Zane continues to say, he should never forget, therefore, that people react markedly to suggestion. In fact, a positive statement made by a determined mind builds a thought form in the astral which works from the inner plane to make the statement a reality. This is the power of suggestion. Consequently, and the will of the astrologer to bring constructive events to pass may be made of great benefit. On the other hand, it may be made a force of great destructive power. So we have to be very responsible with our language and our suggestions when we're working with people and seeing aspects coming up. The astrologer who predicts the death of an individual at a certain time, if the individual is aware of the prediction, may, through suggestion, contribute to the death. And even when the individual is unaware of the prediction, the thought form started by the astrologer and added to by others who believe the astrologer's prediction will be fulfilled. May be an active agent towards causing tragedy. Frightening people is iniquitous because their fear attracts to them disasters that otherwise never would befall. Have you ever wondered why astrologers have been persecuted throughout the ages? Yeah. The Roman emperors would occasionally purge Rome of what they called the Chaldees, basically astrologers. Why? Because they would predict the death of the emperor. I mean, imagine nowadays, how a positive statement from, the head of the Federal Reserve or the president, when they come out and say something positive about the economy, what happens?
Stock market goes
The stock market soars the next day. Or when a negative comment is made, what happens? Well, the equivalent would happen in those days and times, within the environment. So people would put great stake in the utterances of their Chaldees.
Christopher?
Yes.
Jeff asks, it is a question. Is it because thought creates...
Did he include a question mark?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
He says, because thought creates a reality in the astral plane, and what is created in the astral plane eventually manifests itself in the physical plane? Is that why?
That's why.
Okay.
That is why. Really, what progressions are showing us is during a specific period of time, what trends of thinking and what feelings we're going to be having, which subsequently attract events through the environment, through the physical environment. If you've ever been under Mars progressions, you're a danger to yourself and those around you. They get you really feisty for long periods of time, 3 to 4 years. Once having a fight in a paper sack, in a lunch bag, basically every day. In case the quote didn't seem long enough, there is more to this. I do not believe the astrologer ever is justified in lying to his client, but it is within his professional jurisdiction how much of what he discerns he will tell. And in what he does tell his client, he has the opportunity and should use it to impart advice and information in such a manner that the suggestive power and the thought power of his words shall be constructive and of assistance. The psychological effect of delineations and predictions should always be well weighed in connection with the temperament and probable reaction of those to whom made before they are given. Easier said than done. Yeah, how do we ever know how somebody's going to react to what we say? But nevertheless, one needs a guardian at the gate, which basically carefully edits the words as they come out. So here's the process. I've given you some clues. Some of you have already been through the alchemy class, but it's important to know what to do under certain progressed aspects. Lead, tin, iron, copper, mercury or quicksilver, and silver are 6 of the 7 metals of alchemy. And they are natural antidotes to one another in these particular pairings. Gold has no antidote. These are the 7 alchemical metals, and the upper octave planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are assigned to one of the lower octave planets and their metals. Uranus is the upper octave of Mercury, Neptune the upper octave of Venus or copper, and Pluto the upper octave of silver or the moon. These are the experiences we have in life, and over the last few weeks we've talked about the planets and what events they attract. Now, here's a new word for you, at least in this class. It's transmutation. And what does that mean? Basically, to transmute means to change into another nature, substance, form, or condition. Transmutation is what I was doing when I set up the constructive channels through which I wanted the events in my life to unfold. Yeah, the air conditioning's working well.
We would just warm up in Albuquerque, we'd be all set.
In alchemy, the process of transmutation is to turn base metals into gold. This is accomplished through 2 techniques: conversions and antidotes. What does it mean to convert?
To change into something else.
Yes.
Same substance, you would change, you'd work with one substance, right?
Well, yeah, but the word convert is to change something into something else. In alchemy, you are correct in that we're working with the same element. Only instead of the negative qualities, we only allow the positive qualities to express.
So in your case, when you were working with Saturn, were you doing conversion? Or what were you, you were doing?
I did conversion.
Okay.
When I did what I did conversion. I converted Mars and I converted Saturn. Why? Conversion is a more permanent change than transmutation. Now it comes from the Latin conversio, which means a complete change. Changes in character, form, or function. And as Vicki said earlier, you're working with the same substance. If it's Mars, you're working with iron, and you just convert it into positive iron. So on and so forth. Yes?
Is that kind of like when they say they're purifying the metal? So in other words, we would purify the aspects of Mars to make it into a, that's
Exactly.
conversion?
And when you purify something, it enters into the reverberatory furnace, which means that in a furnace, the molecules start speeding up their activity level. It's like bringing water to a boil. And what happens is the dross, which is considered the impure experience, is burnt off in that process.
Christopher, does there have to be an emotional component for the reverberatory furnace to work?
Absolutely. The emotion is what makes it work. It cannot be a purely intellectual process because it is the emotion that gets these molecules moving at a faster vibration.
I'm pretty new to understanding all the nuances of this, but I was reading the other day about how some things, some metals need to have some other metal.
And that will come next.
Oh, okay.
You're only one step ahead of me. So, those are called antidotes.
Oh, okay.
Metals, sounds like a Barbara Streisand song. Metals needing metals are the happiest metals in the world. Obviously can't sing. From the Latin antidotum or the Greek antidoton. This means to give as a remedy against something. So these are, what antidotes are metals that are dissimilar, but which combine constructively with the metal which is the source of the problem. So if we take an antidote, we're taking something that either prevents or counteracts injurious or unwanted effects.
I'm getting confused. There was a time ago you mentioned about how you can use the opposite sign or the opposite something else. So does that apply to this?
No,
No. It's a different kind of antidote.
that's a different concept, which
But
I won't go into only in order to focus on this one. I was talking about signs.
But is that antidote as well?
I don't believe they are
What would you call that then?
opposite signs.
Just using the opposite signs to get a similar effect?
Well, so, no, could we
Yeah, we'll leave it.
get back on
Yeah.
topic? Just put that somewhere in your drawer
Alright,
of
it's
things to
something-
ask me some other time.
All right. Yeah. I
Because
just
that
thought
has nothing to do with tonight's class, and it will,
Oh, I thought it was part of the alchemy. That's
No.
no. Okay.
absolutely not. That's just something to cause confusion for you in this class.
Okay.
So we will avoid that by avoiding the topic. That would take so much time away from what I need to do here. This explains it. In alchemy, antidotes are the metals, thought cells, which energetically combine to correct or recondition discordant energies. This comes through utilizing disparate but compatible elements. They are different, but when they combine together, they build something synergistic, something that is stronger than the separate element. These are the antidotes. So commit this to memory. The antidote to lead is copper, vice versa. Copper is lead. Tin is mercury, vice versa. Mercury, tin. Iron and silver. What do we determine about the sun, which is gold? You got it. No antidote. These are the pairings. All right. We already determined that any progressed aspect of the sun affects our vital force, significance, relationships with authorities, blah, blah, blah. We've done this already, so I'm going to just move forward. You have this in your notes from the very first class. What we want to know is, what do we do when we have progressed aspects to the sun? Zane says, unusual care should be given to dealing with the male sex, to political influences, to the attitude of those above one in station, to things affecting the honor and self-esteem, and especially as affecting the departments of life indicated by the houses in which the sun and the other planet involved in the aspect are located. You have a progressed sun aspect, you are going to be dealing with men and authority figures. And it's up to you to make sure that those experiences become harmonious to you. Here's the thing. We have no control over the other person. The only thing I've decided from astrology that I have control over or my own thoughts, feelings, and impulses, my actions. I cannot determine that it'll be windy, rainy, or beautifully temperate and sunny with light breezes. No power. I have no control over whether my colleagues or coworkers are going to come in a happy mood or a feisty mood on any given day. Whether the persons driving around me on the street are going to be doing so respectfully or doing so in a way that creates danger and harm. Nope, I have no control over that. All I have control over is my reactions to all of that, and my thoughts, my feelings, and my behavior. Whether I want to give them, shout epitaphs and give them certain gestures,
Sometimes that's good.
yeah. Or whether I want to bless them and hold the thought that they be protected and not hurt themselves or anyone else that comes in their way. It depends on the day. What I'm going to do with that. So here's the rub. The sun has no natural mental antidote, but the religious thought cells are unusually potent when held in association with the power thoughts. Whatever the thoughts that are thus selected to be held in the mind at the same time as thoughts of power, of confidence, and of ability to handle whatever situation arises, they must be held with a glow of enthusiasm. It is their harmony that must be depended upon to counteract the planetary discord being received. So, it's important to, when working with the sun, to bring Jupiter in. There's probably no better aspect to have, either in your natal chart or by progressions, in a conjunction, a sextile, or trine between the sun and Jupiter, because of the level of confidence, buoyancy, and the general good luck it brings into your life. I don't have one of those. So, what you have to do is you've got to figure out how to build that state up mentally in your life. What does he call it? A glow of enthusiasm. You got to work on your glow. Daily.
The glow program.
Yes, the glow program. Jupiter is so important, I think, especially with the sun, and it can happen two different ways. The facet of Jupiter I prefer to use is humor. Why? When you laugh, you oxygenate your system, you immediately feel the glow of enthusiasm, and the benefits are immediate. The other aspect of Jupiter is religion, and one can, of course, work on bringing in an abiding sense of deity, of faith, that good things will happen. But you run into the risk when you combine Jupiter and the sun in thought cells, which can be really annoying hyper-piety. Yeah. Overly pious people are not that much fun to be around. So, I think the humor is one way to engender Jupiterian vibrations, and you get the immediate benefit from that, which is oxygenation of the brain. Any progressed aspect of the moon affects our moods, emotional states, our mental attitude, home, family, domestic life, our everyday affairs, relationships with the female sex in general, and mother figures. Having the dominant moon, I have gone through my life marveling how one day one can be in the depths of despair and the next day, filled with elation. Or one can do that every 2 hours. So I marvel at the process, and I've always thought I would get a ring engraved where it said, "This too shall pass." If you have a dominant moon, you can't trust any of it. Your elation will be short-lived, as well as your desperation. So, yeah, it comes and it goes.
Is that good?
It is what it is.
No, I ask it because I have a person in my life with the dominant moon that I'm always curious about. I don't understand.
Yeah, you never
You
will.
just- Okay, all right.
We rarely even understand ourselves, let alone expect understanding from others.
Okay.
We just want
Well, that's
sympathy.
interesting to me. Thank you. That's what, yeah. Okay.
You don't have to offer advice or help, just be a good listener, and
Okay.
that's it. So, under unfavorable progressed aspects involving the moon, the health, contacts with women, relations with the public, the attitude of the mind, and those things indicated by the house position of the moon and the other planets involved in the aspect should receive special attention. Why the health?
The Constitution.
Thank you. Think of your moods. I believe it has been proven scientifically that one's moods have an impact on their health. Why? Our moods stimulate different members of the endocrine system. They cause different neurochemicals to be stimulated and different hormones to be released into the system, some of which can be helpful to the healing process, some of which are detrimental to the healing process. So, the moon impacts our constitution, which is our ability to recuperate from things in life. One can have great vitality, but if you don't have recuperative ability, what happens when you get sick?
Lingers.
No, you die.
Oh, you don't know.
It lingers and then you die.
Okay.
Right. You need to have a good constitution or recuperative ability to survive this thing called your life.
Vicki, Nell asks if you have a dominant moon.
Ask if I do?
Yeah. Because you asked that question.
No,
You had a friend, right?
I have a daughter.
A special friend. Well, here's great advice. Harmonious thinking and feeling in general, because the temporary stellar aerial, having the moon dynamic structure at one terminal, is so open to reception, if associated with such feeling of desire and effort to minister to the welfare of others, tends to correct the discord of a progressed aspect involving the moon. But the most effective thoughts and feelings for this purpose are of the aggressive type ruled by Mars, which are the natural antidote. Keep in mind that when you're having lunar aspects, what is your natural reaction? I'll just sit here in the dark. You know what Mars tells you to do?
Get out.
Get up and change the friggin' light bulb. It won't take but a few seconds.
But here's the thing, if you've got a planet like Mars, which is kind of negative, then it's kind of harder, isn't it?
It is. Absolutely. Why? You've got to change the light bulb without doing what I just did, which was cursing. That's the challenge when you apply Mars to the moon.
Well, you know what? I think it helps to have an image, though. Zane has an image of someone. It's like someone who's weak or helpless is being attacked or is in some sort of dire need, and you go to their rescue. That would be a good application of Moon to Mars.
It is. It is. It's the knight. If you want to use an archetype, it is the knight in shining armor rescuing the helpless damsel.
Oh, that's a nice image, yeah.
You know, think of St. George and the Dragon
Is
or
this like
something, depending on your
A bit like
religious tradition.
the Grail legend.
It could be like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the application. I survive my moon aspects much more successfully when I'm willing to do something about it. It doesn't take more than 2 minutes to change the light bulb. But some days, it's just so damn hard to do. Mercury, you asked earlier, Yvette, about making errors. Well, Mercury affects our studies, mental interest, increases our writing and intellectual activity, accuracy in calculations and memory, and attracts opportunities for communication, and self-expression. Communion on Sundays. What do you do if Mercury's afflicted? I'm starting to forget things, or not remembering people's names, or forgetting to enter the amount in the check register. These are all Mercury afflictions. Under an unfavorable progression involving Mercury, only thoughts should be permitted which are pleasant and which move forward to some purpose. Ever tried that?
Yeah, you keep trying.
This is the best work you can do. Clerical and other errors and slight mistakes should be guarded against, and a special care should be exercised as to the exact purport of any document which is signed. What is said to others may be subject to misinterpretation. Well, that's never happened. This is even easier with texting and email, where one gets no benefit of intonation or body language as additional communication keys. People who try to carry on their relationships that way run into loads of trouble. We depend on so many other subtleties in communication. There are loads of oral and physical clues that we get. All right. The natural antidote, and thus the best type of thoughts to associate with the intellectual activities at such a time, are religious thoughts. This does not signify one must turn to religion, but the optimism and confidence of Jupiter that all will work out as desired should be cultivated. The reliance on a higher power than human intelligence. After human intelligence has done its best, there's an attitude which adds harmony to the thought cells influenced by Mercury in the most potent form. In other words, God helps those who help themselves. It says here, the reliance on a higher power than human intelligence after human intelligence has done its best.
Yeah.
My affirmation for this, when I need to kick into correcting Mercury, is, I'm always in the right place at the right time, successfully engaged in the right activities. It's the way to sink into that when the Mercury critic might otherwise come up and start, nitpicking with the elements in your life. You just have to shift into a constructive outlet with that. And for me, in those few words, I'm able to get my mind, when the train's been derailed, it's the way to get it back on the track. It's Venus. Venus attracts friendships, socializing, affection, romantic opportunities, gratuities, gifts, pleasure, experiences with beauty and the arts. You have all this information, but you don't have this. What to do? Under an unfavorable progression involving Venus, slights, either real or fancied, are apt to arise. Perhaps events over which no one seems to have any control will, for the time being, cause conditions that stir up grief and emotion. The less attention the individual pays to slights during such a period, the better. Whether intentional or not, and whether caused by unavoidable conditions or not, the discord of Venus thrive on emotional perturbation.
What is that word?
To be perturbed. Perturbation is a continual state of perturbance.
Like irritation.
Mm-hmm. Such a great word. I'll have to use that more often. The best procedure, therefore, is to invoke the aid of the safety thoughts ruled by Saturn, and also sufficient of the power thoughts ruled by the Sun.
That's hard.
Uh-huh. But it's not impossible. I have Venus tied into a T-square involving the moon and my ascendant in my chart. And as a child, not only was I pathologically shy, I also had great sensitivities to slights. I have a friend who will say, I can't hurt your feelings, you don't have any. And my alchemy with that is, I really don't take anything as a slight unless you're clearly in my face insulting me. I just no longer interpret any other actions as personal slights towards me.
Yeah.
I may not be perfect at that, but that's been sort of the end result of working on that aspect of my character. You know, I don't assume anything unless it's really, really clear.
It's a good, healthy way to look at it.
Yeah.
Works for me.
Yeah. So often people always feel slighted when the intention was never there.
Right.
And that's horrible.
No, somebody rushed into the room with something in mind that they were going to do and they forgot to say hello to you.
Right.
Yeah. Had nothing to do with me.
So the Saturn is just to kind of have a cool,
Cool, calm, collected.
calm, collected attitude about it.
Yeah, the 3 C's. The safety thoughts, which give a cold appraisal of circumstances, thus being asserted that I have no feeling, and are under the dominion of reason and quite apart from emotion, are the natural antidote for the social thoughts of Venus. That is, they enter into the social thought cells in the astral body most readily in the formation of a highly beneficial compound. And the realization that the less emotion permitted, the less misfortune will be experienced, is an easy way to apply these safety thoughts. Pleasure should be felt in the conquest of emotion by cold reason. Sounds almost hideous, but
Well, you know,
from my application, hopefully you understand what he's saying. Is the cold reason here is not going through life being, cold, unfeeling, and detached. It's just deciding in the area of, personal hurts and slights that, unless there's hard evidence,
acceptance, live and let live.
yeah.
Yeah. Always the energy.
There is plenty to cry about in life. I have, gosh, what was it? 2008? I had 14 friends die. It was more than once a month I was going to a funeral. So there are real things in life to get worked up about, and there are, whether someone said hello to you or not, or recognized you at a party, or remembered to invite you to an event, give me a break. Progression, that probably should have an S on it. We'll call it progressions involving Mars, expressed through courage, passion, strife, antagonism, and effort. Remember to select carefully from the menu. I choose effort. These, which are in your first notes, are actually useful. Let's look at this for a moment. What can progress Mars aspects bring? impulsiveness, lust, anger, strife, destruction, aggression, accidents, injuries, and fevers. I would only take lust from that list. Maybe impulsiveness. It's a pretty desperate list. However, on this list, if you're going through these, initiative, energy, passion, courage, defense, constructive efforts, building up rather than tearing down. These are good keywords to work with when you're looking at your progressions in advance and deciding how they're going to express. Haste, impulse, and too great activity should be guarded against. But as Mars is a social planet, the relations with people are even more commonly a source of difficulty. Pains should be taken not to say or do that which causes offense or which will lead to strife, unless it has calmly been decided upon that strife is the only proper course to pursue.
That's a really spooky there.
Yeah. Because keep in mind, you know, when you're training a dog or a small child, or a spouse, sometimes the only way you actually get people to remember something is when you get mad. Why? It creates enough of a psychologically stimulating environment that people become aware that they don't necessarily want to push that button again and get the same reaction. So it can actually be a very helpful training tool. And there are certain times where if somebody is bullying you or doing you harm, sometimes standing up or creating a condition of strife is really the only way that the situation will get remedied.
It's like meeting equal force.
With force.
With
Yeah.
force, yeah. And it's a boundaries setting thing. So it's kind of interesting because that's where the constructive, it's almost like it has it's not Saturn, but it has that possibility to constructively delineate situations.
Mm-hmm. And boundaries are really important. And sometimes they are only made aware when we draw a line in the sand with someone. You know, don't go there, it pisses me off. You're really irritating me right now. The domestic thoughts are the natural antidote, and the best way of applying them is merely to interest oneself as thoroughly as possible in helping those who are weak and in distress. Again, Mars, Moon, damsel in distress, knight in shining armor. We can use these mental archetypes a lot to help ourselves. This maternal attitude and the action springing from it, if sufficiently encouraged, will generate the thought elements which, if pleasure is felt in them, will combine with the aggressive thoughts in the astral body to form a more fortunate compound. The more such thoughts of helping others tend to displace the discordant thoughts of strife, the more favorable the events which will be attracted by the progressed aspect. Under Mars interplane weather, cultivate patience and take it easy.
Yeah, easy said than done.
Right, when you're
do it in that,
when you're ready to stroke out.
or do some martial arts or something, you know. I think that's one of the hardest things because it generates so much energy.
Mm-hmm.
That energy does need to be really
Right, and keep in mind, the majority of our prisons are populated by persons with poor impulse control. What they did under progressed Mars aspects landed them somewhere. So we have to really antidote Mars. It's 1/4 discord. It is the lesser malefic. The rest of them got there because of Saturn. Jupiter progressions attract abundance, opportunities, goodwill, and luck. Oh, I'll have none of that. Okay. You wonder, why would anybody want to antidote that? Because sometimes it looks like this. The other thing is, under Jupiter progressions, depending on how it is in our natal chart and the type of progressions received, we can express with conceit or arrogance, a holier-than-thou attitude, religious fanaticism, being overly optimistic, excessive generosity, self-indulgence. That needs an antidote. So, self-indulgence, extravagance, unwise optimism, too great generosity and willingness to consider the cost, and unwarranted business expansion are the chief things which an unfavorable progression involving Jupiter tends to attract. All of these things are attracted due to the lack of careful analysis of the situation, the reliance upon chance or the opinion of others, or on the good offices of others, sometimes even too great enthusiasm to present one's religious opinions may cause difficulty. Don't say that in a crowd of evangelicals. You'll definitely have something to antidote. But whatever the discord that a progressed aspect involving Jupiter brings, basically it is due to lack of intelligence. The house position of Jupiter and of the other planet involved in the aspect indicate the departments of life chiefly affected. But in general, as Jupiter is a business planet, the finances also need attention, and the kind of attention most needed is to cultivate a pleasure in carefully analyzing and appraising by the most conservative methods every transaction which is entered into, especially those indicated by the progressed aspect. Use your intelligence. Here's the conflict. Okay, on one hand we're saying that thinking constructively, positively, buoyantly, and enthusiastically has the ability to attract good things into your life. And now I'm saying that, not always. Considering the options, it is better for you to think that way. But in terms of taking action on certain things in your life, there also has to be a correct appraisal of what's going on beforehand. Because sometimes you can enter into a situation with the greatest intention and not get the outcome you want. Saturn progressions. Lack of resources, restrictions, losses, confinements, sorrow, responsibilities. Yes, we would like to antidote that. So, the thing to remember is, when you're going through that, cultivate this.
Conscientiousness.
Conscientiousness. What is that?
Being thorough.
Bringing yourself to whatever it is you're doing.
Yes, bringing yourself to the task.
Paying attention.
If you're counting change, do it accurately. If you're having a conversation with a friend, listen intently.
Just to let you know, those lists are not in our class 1. They were like put on there and we had to write them down real fast.
Oh,
And I didn't do that.
were they in class 2?
No, there weren't in any classes.
They were just kind of put up there and we had to write real fast, but we never could write that real fast. I couldn't.
Oh, you know what they were in? The previous class.
I could probably find
It all runs into one to me. But that, they were in the class on the planets that I taught just starting in January up until whenever this class began. So,
Okay.
thank you for doing your conscientious research and not relying on blind faith that that I was actually correct. All right, under progressed aspects to Saturn, the trend of the thoughts under an unfavorable progression involving Saturn is to look upon the dark side of things. There's a surprise. The planetary vibrations received by the thought cells at the terminal of the temporary stellar aerial are heavy, morose, self-centered, and lacking in buoyancy and elasticity, imparting to these cells a feeling which causes them to work from the inner plane to attract want, responsibility, and loss. I'm ready to start tearing up here. Because Saturn thoughts are so insistently present, weighing down the personality, no special effort is necessary to cause them to associate with other thoughts and feelings that may be cultivated. Yet social contacts and other Venus activities are of no value unless the lightheartedness and gaiety of Venus are experienced. What is he saying? All right.
Go have a party.
Any of you ever been depressed?
Yes.
Yeah. And did you ever find going to a party necessarily helping that?
No, it really annoyed me that I had to go to that party.
For me, it worked. However, it is not the common panacea for most depressed people.
Once you
Why?
go, you're okay though.
Right. Yeah, getting yourself there is the problem. But no, sometimes if you're deeply despondent, going around other people who are twittering and happy and, mingle, mingle, clink, clink, isn't necessarily going to raise your mood. You might actually feel worse that the world is populated by happy people and you're, having this miserable lot in life. So it doesn't always work except when the lightheartedness and gaiety of Venus are experienced. Unless you can tap into that experience at the party, you're actually going to be digging your grave deeper. So,
Better be a dancing party then.
yeah, better be a dance party.
Doesn't it need the sun too, though?
Well, let's look and see. I believe it does because Saturn is so negative.
Yeah.
But,
And Venus is negative too.
yeah. All right.
Oh.
It may require great fortitude when things apparently are going to pieces. And even social slights and financial losses may be in the offing to mix with people, to dance, sing, go to the movies, make merry, and take joy in art and music. But there is nothing better to drive away the Saturn blues, and nothing better to add happy thought elements to the safety thought compounds in a manner which most readily transforms them into a dynamic stellar compound, which attracts good fortune. Under Saturn, inner plane weather, keep your chin up and cultivate cheerfulness. Ho, ho!
Well, I guess things like enjoying a sunset or something beautiful in nature, they're probably less jarring.
That, or you know what? Making art.
Yes.
If you're a musician,
Yeah.
deciding to go and play your viola, or your piano, or your guitar, or making art, sitting and being so intensely focused on a project, and all art is about problem solving. It actually shifts your intelligence into another form of action that temporarily relieves you from the grinding responsibilities and burdens. Question or statement or...
There's a question from Jeff. He wants to know if he's going to become a lottery winner or complete bankruptcy when progressed Mercury conjunct progressed Venus in the second house opposite natal Jupiter in the 8th house. Does that make any sense?
I would hesitate giving an answer on that without looking at the chart. And considering there's only 15 minutes left in class, I'm going to actually focus back on the material I wanted to cover tonight. So that may have been said in jest, or we may look at it at another time. Just won't be now.
Or you can email you.
Yeah, email me with that. All right, what happens under Uranus progressions? Sudden change, eccentric behavior, fads, novelty, inventions, and discoveries. Sometimes those changes aren't wanted by you. Uranus, as octave of Mercury, has direct access to the electromagnetic form to the nerve currents, and its discords tend to unusually high tension of the nervous system and to depletion of the electromagnetic energy. In particular, it opens the gate to outside influences, notably those of people, who often gain at such times through hypnotic effect, mental influence, or through misplaced confidence, altogether too great a control over your life.
So is that like somebody almost being...
Svengali?
No, because their nervous system is so sensitized that they're picking up stuff, a bunch of stuff, and not realizing that those things are actually affecting
They're like
them.
human chihuahuas under Uranus progressions.
Yeah, but I mean...
They're just there in life, quivering away.
But then all these, I guess, not possessions, but they're more open to that kind of...
Right, you do
influence.
pick up radio fashion on the influences going on around you.
Okay, that's a bit like psychics, like a sponge. It's a complementary learner thing.
All attachments made during such a progression should be subject to certain reservations. Yeah, especially if it's Uranus-Venus aspects. You may think you're in love. Yet, excellent progress in astrology and the occult sciences can be made under even heavy, unfavorable progressed aspects involving this planet. An aspect involving Uranus favors gaining new information, and as a result of such new information, the viewpoint often is changed. The natural antidote for an unfavorable Uranus is the same as for an unfavorable Mercury. What has been said as to applying the religious thoughts to counteract a discordant Mercury applies with equal force to transforming Uranian thought compound into one of the more fortunate trends. Remember, I'm always in the right place at the right time, successfully engaged in the right activities. Under Uranus aspects, there'll be moments where you doubt that.
Oops. Turn it off. Sorry.
It's a spirit message.
Uranus just showed up.
It sure did. It'll eventually stop, Erica. All right. Progressions of Neptune involve imagination, visionary ideals, intuition, illusions, fantasy thinking, and psychic sensitivity. This is more of the sponge effect that you were talking about, Summer. Any unfavorable progression involving Neptune requires the same cultivation of the safety thoughts that prescribed for its octave, Venus. But in addition, because it is so much more negative and sensitive, the power thoughts should receive even more consideration. So, when you have Neptune aspects, you not only apply Saturn, but you apply the Sun, because otherwise the combination of the two can be so negative. Whereas the Sun brings courage, stamina, positiveness, and determination, are especially required to offset the shrinking sensitiveness and the dreaminess which the vibrations of Neptune encourage. Neptune progressions, reality check. Such discord tends to attract schemes which work to the detriment of the individual. Imaginary advantages seem unusually attractive and may lead to loss. On the other hand, imaginary dangers may harass and require adequate power thoughts to banish. Psychic matters, new habits, or even drugs may tend to enslave the person, and poison may affect the health. Yet, even under quite unfavorable progressed aspects involving Neptune, good progress may be made in music, in fiction writing, or in dramatic work. Get off the drugs, take an acting class.
No, sometimes it particularly afflicted, those power thoughts don't do very much in a short time. You know, it's almost like you need to get exercised or something, sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, truly, sometimes it does take a shamanic experience or a cleaning or some kind of powerful psychic experience to push someone out of that particular phase in their life. Yes.
Doesn't Zane also talk about the fact that once the progression is already engaged, it's very difficult to go in and start trying to apply the antidotes?
I don't know about that, but my own experience is, from the examples I gave you earlier, it works much better if you know about it ahead of time.
Yeah.
And when you're not in the experience, you know, it's much like being in the middle of your own nightmare. Sometimes taking control and getting yourself out of that in the form of lucid dreaming is much harder once you're there. But it's sort of the thing. It's easier if you get a sense of what's coming to start planning for it and setting things in motion while you're actually lucid.
So start what you can before the aspect comes
Absolutely.
in. Yeah.
Or was it be alert to be aware of the approach of thoughts, feelings, and emotions?
Yes, and I think that's in what, course 5?
Or 8, maybe
I am alert to the approach of,
thoughts, feelings, and something like that. I think that's where he talks about it.
that may be detrimental, and in their stead I cultivate something or other.
Right.
Obviously I didn't memorize that lesson.
We tried.
Pluto's a really tough one. Pluto progressions, these you definitely have to work on in advance rather than when you're in the thick of it. What happens when you're in the middle of the mob and they're acting out? Getting out of that is almost, you cannot find the exit. So, with Pluto progressions, you need to be so clear in advance where you're going to be. On its better side, Pluto has to do with soulmates. And on its adverse side, with weaknesses due to separation. Unusual discrimination is required while an unfavorable progression of Pluto is operative. That contact with the criminal world of both planes be avoided. Kidnapping or becoming the tool of visible or invisible racketeers should specially be guarded against, I'd say. Such things at times are present in slight degree without being recognized. Association with groups of doubtful character and situations that might lead to coercion should be avoided. You don't know when you're going to be in the bar when the fight breaks out. Or, again, Pluto activities, you could be on the street when there's a gang-related shooting that happens. You could be at Walmart and this happens. You don't necessarily have to be, hanging out with homies to have that experience happen.
So if you've got a conjunction, that'll be more positive, but there's a lot of factors involved, because, depending on your natal Pluto and all sorts of things.
Right, and one of the best ways to set this up in advance is to find a constructive community to be a part of. Finding a group, club, organization that or a charitable cause or a community activity. It could be a community garden and, community crime watch and neighborhood association. You find something to engage in that has you functioning with a group that is wholly positive. That may be oxymoronic, groups and wholly positive. Because you're dealing with human beings, so there can be issues, but sometimes some groups are more constructive than others. So basically, we apply aggressive thought cells just as we do with the moon, because the tendency of this can be passivity, though in this case, it can be the passivity that comes along with just going along with the mob. I just like this quote. Whether one wholly agrees with the methods by which J.P. Morgan actually gained his wealth or not, there might be moral considerations there, but anyone can be a millionaire, but to become a billionaire, you need an astrologer. All right, I've got 5 minutes left. This is the end of this class. I won't be talking to many of you for a long while. But I actually want you to put this to work in your lives. And what I'd like you to do is to spend this summer actually working on this, taking everything you've garnered from the class, and then pick one. Choose a discordant progressed aspect that is coming up in your chart, or that is currently an orb. Judging from our earlier conversation, though, I'd say you're better off to pick something that's coming up rather than something that you're in the thick of right now. Why? You'll actually have perspective. Square, opposition, aspect involving Mars or Saturn, or even a harmonious aspect that involves a planet that's highly discordant in the birth chart can be something to choose. Remember the power of negative thinking? This is where it really comes in helpful. Write down your worst case scenario. What was my worst case scenario with my progressed Mars conjuncting Saturn in my 8th house? I could die. That was it. Worst case scenario. So what I did was decide other ways I wanted that to express. So you're writing down what might happen if this is unchecked or undirected.
So do you do the worst case scenario for the emotional component, or what, or just
It's just my order of
an
operation.
exploration? Okay, got it.
There are other steps to this,
Okay.
but this is where I go first.
Okay.
Okay, look at this aspect. What the heck could it mean? So, use your very best powers of negative thinking and come up with the worst case scenario. Why? Anything that happens might actually be better than that. So, in the words of Mark Twain, in my life I had many problems, few of which ever came to pass. That's why we do this. Another fellow Sagittarian. All right, once you've done that, I then suggest you write down your best case scenario, or what might happen if you actually direct that energy carefully and only allow the best energies to express. In my case, with the aspects I had, I thought, oh, under this, I could develop credit. And I could actually have a will in place. And I could start working on a retirement fund. Doesn't that sound like fun? But that was the best case scenario I could come up with that aspect. Of those three, I have outstanding credit, which I try not to use. Assuming that the best possible outcomes could arise during this window of opportunity, write down a realizable goal you might like to accomplish while this aspect is in orb. Your income increasing by 100% in a recession might not be a realizable goal. Why do we want a realizable goal? Any ideas? We're actually training ourselves to set up new habit systems, and if you are successful in the process, you then approach the next set of conditions already with a certain degree of confidence and ability in place, and your subconscious organism is working with you on the next aspect you decide to approach. Yes?
Just very quickly, when you have a transit to one of those major aspects, and they're only kind of going for 2 days, does that mean it kick-starts, or is it only just like a tiny, tiny little thing? Or does it vary?
It just means that you have additional energy during that period of time.
So on those few days, that there'll be a more heightened whatever it is.
Yeah,
in that
there is.
combination.
Pay attention. Something could happen.
Okay. So it doesn't necessarily catalyze.
No.
No. Okay.
No, it just means that there are likelihoods of activity during those periods of time. But as we've discussed already, you can have your major progression, no minor, no transit, and still have activities going on, because the psychokinetic energy, the power of the unconscious mind, under major progressions is strong enough to pull events into one's life. All right. On these lists, you have antidotes and conversions. So what you want to do is also write down the mental attitudes you might cultivate for the best possible results while that aspect is in orb. Next, you want to write down what action steps you can take to help bring about the most constructive outcome to this aspect. I showed you my action steps earlier. Come up with your own list according to your own aspect. Then the other thing you want to write down is what's available to you in your environment. So what resources, persons, services, skills might be available during the period that aspect is in orb. To have something come to pass or manifest, the environment has to be cooperative. Next step, write an affirmation or positive thought statement that builds an expectation for your desired outcome. Use keywords associated with the planets and houses involved in the progressed aspect. Repeat this process over the next few months with other progressed aspects that are entering orb. I recommend you create a personal journal or workbook in which to do this. It's very insightful, and start working on your life chronology and matching up aspects, because again, hindsight's 20/20, and it helps us with our vision of the future. If you have trouble with this portion, of course we've run out of time to go over this tonight. You all should have access to the quarterly. And in the last 9 issues of the quarterly, there is a section on page 5 which says alchemical affirmations or alchemical prayer. And each one of those is associated with one of the planets, and you can go in there and start pulling out keywords or concepts, or decide that you're going to incorporate those precise statements while you're undergoing a progressed aspect to the planet
Are they
involved.
online? Are they available?
They're all online under quarterly archives. So they're accessible and available, and that's a really great way to be able to get a jump start on this portion of the process. Any questions, additions from the peanut gallery out there?
Not really.
Okay. I just want to say thank you to those of you in the room who have stuck it out for these 5 weeks, and
Thank you.
those of you online who have continued to attend and support our classes. Support Yvette when she starts up next month, and I will be back in the fall, either late August or September, with something new. And again, as I mentioned in last week's class, if you email me, christopher@light.org, and leave a suggestion of something you'd like to learn or a class that you would like to see created. It may not happen in September, but then again it might, but it may go into my list of new classes that I start to organize and prepare for. Also, those of you in the upper Midwest or in the Chicago area, I'm actually going to be out there lecturing on June 12th for a Chicago-based group called Friends of Astrology. The event is going to be held at the Parthenon Restaurant, and I don't have the prices for that event in front of me, but you can go to the website for Friends of Astrology. Because I'm on a very short leash while I'm out there, I don't have any time to actually meet up, socialize, visit with people. But if you're interested in a full-day workshop on Hermetic astrology, which covers, again, astrodynes, progressions, and alchemy, that will be happening from 9 to 5 on June 12th at the Parthenon Restaurant on, I forget the name of the street, it begins with an H, something like Halston Street. All right, thank you all.
Can you
Yes.
say the dates of my class? Because everybody's getting confused. I think it's next week.
Yes, if you received a flyer that looks like this, don't believe anything it says, other than the name of the teacher.
Well, there's some stuff that's.
Okay, I understand you corrected. Just don't believe the dates. It's actually on Wednesdays, being June 9th through August 25th.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Wrong
Wednesday
start
nights.
date, okay.
But it's
So
June
just
9th.
think Wednesdays. Wednesdays.
Thank you.
All right.